Good evening and welcome to this special session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. Board members in attendance tonight include Director Kelleher, Director David Anderson, Chair Baker, Director Carly Anderson, Director Lind, and Director Thompson. Before we get started tonight on our discussion, I just want to talk about why we're here tonight and what we're doing. So I've had some time to reflect on this meeting and the appointment process. Through countless emails and phone calls, I'm left feeling like the divide within our community continues to grow. This is not about who is right or wrong, who won or lost, or whether you supported this process or not. This decision and every decision we make should be about what is best for kids. The law is clear that a board must appoint a replacement when someone resigns after the time frame to be on the ballot. The law, however, does not dictate the process of how a board appoints someone. Although the law is clear, it is our duty to appoint. So we meet tonight to carry out that process. Our agenda for tonight is to discuss the questions, interview the candidate, discuss the interview, and then vote on the appointment of the candidate. As the board has not determined any qualifying criteria for a candidate in the appointment process, we must look to the requirements listed in the law. Number 1, must be at least 21 years old. Number 2, must be an eligible voter. Number 3, must be a district resident for at least 30 days. And number 4, must not be a convicted sex offender. And those are all listed in state statute. To clarify for the public, this appointment is an interim placement, and the appointee must run for election by November of 2025, giving the community a chance to fully voice their opinion. Board members, please be advised, if the discussion deviates to anything other than the interview questions and the candidate's response, I will call point of order in which you are to stop speaking, and I will request that you focus your response to the topic that we are discussing tonight. If we want to heal the divide within our community, it starts with us. All right, so every board member should have a copy of the questions that they submitted later. So what we need to do right now is discuss which questions you're going to ask. There are a few that I put a mark by as I felt like they were similar to other questions. So we can start with those first. Brian and Carly, I think there was one that both of you had that was very similar, so maybe between the two of you, you can figure out who's asking what. Go ahead.
And for clarification, we landed on just asking one question total per
One
person.
question per board member, that's correct.
Okay.
I just thought that both of you had a question that was related to academic scores. And I'm not sure if, I mean, given that we're only given six questions, I don't think it makes sense to ask two that are related to academic scores. So between the two of you, did you want to decide?
Or do we want input from others?
You can ask, yeah. I mean, this is a discussion, so. Thoughts about those questions?
Brian, I'm fine letting you have that question.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think the second one that you have is similar to my second one, and I think that would be an important one to ask. And
Yeah.
so,
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree with that.
Yep. Would you like to ask it, or would you like me to? It doesn't matter.
you can ask it.
Okay.
So then you're going to go with your first one, Carly? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that takes care of that one,
But I might actually use your question.
because hers is worded a little bit better.
Better.
Mine is better.
Mine's like,
Did you just admit Carly's question was better?
He admitted it, yes.
All right. All right, so we have those two questions. And then, Terry, you submitted
Book.
a bunch of different questions. Is there one in particular that you're leaning towards? And when I look at everyone else's, I would say that your mental health one kind of sticks out, as that's not something that other people had asked.
Is that good or bad? Okay, let me think. You want to go on to the next ones?
Sure.
I'll come back.
So Dave, there was one for you and I that was similar, so if you want to ask my first question,
Yep.
and then I'll ask my second one,
Yep.
does that work?
Yep.
All right. Judy, which one did you want to ask of the two that you submitted?
It doesn't really matter, probably the first one.
Yeah, when I look at the other questions, I think that sticks out too. All right, so Judy's going with that one. So it's back to you, Terry.
That's all settled already?
Yep,
I like your second
I'm
one.
still reading my book.
I know.
like your second.
You wrote a lot. I like the second one too.
The second one?
Yes,
Okay, we'll go with that one.
all right. All right. Kim, since we have all our questions settled, I think we'll just go in order from
Kim?
Judy around this way. Is that how you want to do it?
Could you tell me which people are doing which questions?
Just go from the sheet. 'Cause we only-
Or do you have it?
Would you be okay you want to
go
just
from the
ask
sheet.
all the questions?
Sorry?
Do you want to just ask all the questions? Do we
I can
really
ask
need-
all the
No, we
questions.
we should each ask questions.
Okay.
What?
I have no issues if you want to just ask all the questions.
So,
Okay, I got that one.
I think we just go from Judy all the way down to Brian, and we'll just ask them all.
Okay.
Is that good? So we'll start with Judy. She'll ask the first question, and then we'll go around. Kim, do you want to go get him? Thank you. I can't read your writing. What about it? I'll give him, yeah. Hi, yeah, so you're gonna need to move the microphone over, so.
oh,
That's all right, that's all right.
Probably
Maybe
gonna
put it a
wanna turn
little
it up.
closer to your mouth. There you go. Thank you.
Good
So-
enough?
Yeah, so thank you for being here tonight and coming in for this interview process. How it'll go is that we'll start with Judy, and each one of us will ask a question. We only get one question, so you have 6 questions to ask. But I would like to give you an opportunity to just kind of give an opening statement or a welcome, and then we'll just go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the community, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity. I really don't have a ton to say. I haven't been through a job interview in almost 20 years, so trying to prepare for this has been a little bit of a blast from the past. I guess at this point, most of you know some of my credentials based on the recent campaign. I'm happy to elaborate, happy to answer any questions you have, so I guess if you'd like, I'll just turn it over to you guys at this point then.
All right, thank you. Judy?
well, good evening. Thank you for being here, Brett. So this is kind of a little bit of probably a 3-parter question. So what do you see as the greatest strengths of our school district? And what is an area where you believe the district could improve? And what would you do to maintain and enhance the strength? And how would you address the opportunity for improvement?
And we can repeat the parts of those questions
Sure.
to make sure you get all of it.
Sure. So I think from a strength perspective, we have a lot of dedicated, experienced teachers and staff. I think we have a really engaged community. I think we have fantastic PTO and great facilities. I think everyone on the board and the administration and the teachers, all the staff, I think they truly want what's best for the kids. In terms of opportunities, I would say that over the last, I'll say at minimum 6 weeks, I think as a group, everybody's been somewhat distracted by this. I would say distracted from the mission. We haven't really had a whole lot of conversations about academics, kids' well-being, which is what I think we're supposed to be focused on. In general, I think that communication could be improved from the board to the community. I think there's typically a lot of questions that are still left unanswered for a lot of people after board sessions and decisions are made. I think how that gets communicated could be better. I'll leave it at that for right now. And then you want to know what I would do to maintain the strengths.
Yep, maintain and enhance the strength.
Maintain and enhance. Like I said, I think we have a good staff, we have good teachers, I think we have people who care. I don't want that to go away. I think we need to maintain and work with the superintendent to make sure that there's a culture of excellence and a culture that everybody wants to be around. So to me, building a culture of inclusion, building a culture of collaboration, I think is something we definitely need to continue working on. And that's one of those things that, from a continuous improvement perspective, probably never needs to stop. I do think there are some probably adversarial feelings amongst union, administration, things with the board, everything else. I'm sure there's some hard feelings and whatnot that might have to be overcome. Honestly, I'm more of a, I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to, ask a lot of why questions, and if I don't have the answer, I'll try to help find it. Which part of your question did I miss?
You got it.
Okay.
That was, yeah, let's, just for clarity.
Yep.
I know you talked about how you would, or about addressing the opportunity for improvement, but do you have an idea of how you would do that with the communication to the community?
I don't know the ins and outs of how communication comes out of the board
Yeah.
now. So I would have to, there would have to be a little bit of a learning curve for me to figure out what the messaging is. Does it come from the chair? Does it come from somebody else, or what? How does that message get out to the community? How do the emails come out and all that kind of stuff? So I don't know who writes that or how that gets done.
Yeah.
But, clarity, I think, from sort of the top down is a important thing, so.
Yeah, fair enough.
Dave, you're up.
Welcome, Brett. So that can lead into my question is, what's the best way to address differences of opinion on the board or between the board and administration?
The best way to address differences. I like to have conversations. I'm a big person who wants to hear all your opinions, hear the why. And I'll say that a lot if that's, if that's a situation that, if there's a situation where people differ, I want to know the why behind both of them. So if I don't know the why, it's really hard to form a good opinion for me, because I don't have everybody's perspective. I don't have the same perspective or background or experience as anybody else. So to me, understanding why, or at least trying to figure out what the why is critical. Aside from that, I'm okay with polite discourse, so I can have a conversation, and I'm not going to necessarily have it hurt my feelings. I'm okay hearing anybody's perspective, and if they think I'm wrong, I'm happy to listen to it. That doesn't bother me.
So are you willing to then compromise if you,
You need to get up to the microphone.
sorry, I was there. Are you willing to compromise?
You turned it off.
Are you willing to compromise to get stuff done?
I think you always have to compromise to get things done. There always has to be some give and take. So you have to be willing to listen to both sides, willing to understand where people are coming from and why, and then you can actually come to resolution. So we typically talk about clarity, consensus, and commitment. So without some sort of clarity, you can't get consensus, and then you can't be committed in terms of a common direction going forward. And I think that's critical, so.
Thank you.
All right. How will you address the different needs of all students?
Well, I hope that's not my responsibility to address the needs of everybody.
Well, when we think about what our job is as a board member elected
Yes.
to this office, we all have things that we are passionate about. One of mine is special ed, but as a board member, I'm representing all the students in the district. So, so how do you address the different needs of all the students?
Again, I think it's going to be mostly about listening for me. I am not a teacher. I am not an educator by trade. It's not something I've done. I get a lot of input from my wife, who is an educator. She likes to explain a lot of things when I say, why do we do this kind of stuff, or why does this happen? She helps clarify a lot of things from a different perspective for me. The way you can ask different questions and find different ways to understand, again, who do we need to help and why, I think is important.
I'm not going to ask a clarifying question, but I am going to say my husband and I have those conversations because I'm an educator and he's an engineer and he doesn't understand education, so it's okay.
There you go.
right.
I definitely feel that.
Hi, Brett. Thanks for being here. In our recent levy, we asked the community to approve adding student supports at all levels. So behavioral support specialists at the elementary level and counseling supports at the secondary level. There was also things related to music and librarians. Did you support this levy when talking with the community? Why or why not?
I did support the levy. I didn't try to persuade anybody to vote for it or not vote for it. Talking with a few of the board members and some other people in the district, I did express some concerns over the messaging. So there are some things that I'm not surprised it didn't go through because I don't think some things were clear. I did express that to some folks in the district office. And I thought it might be helpful if that clarified, if some of those questions were clarified for the community to have a more informed vote. I heard from a couple people when I was door knocking, like, are we really 512 to 1? Like, is that really our teachers and staff ratio? I think the initial information that came out was not clear about that. I don't know if it still had that little parenthesis underneath that said this was support staff only. But people took it as, it was teachers and everything else. So clarifying that a little bit was, I think, good. But I do think that from a messaging perspective, we can do better. And if we need the money and we need the resources, I think we can do better in terms of having a good, articulate way to explain why. And I think that's something we should do. For the record, when the newspaper actually called and asked me a similar question, I said I'm more than willing to sit down and go through the budget and figure out if these are the types of positions we need and we're short on, we should figure out how to staff it. And I think that if we need to do a zero-based budgeting exercise or something like that to sort of get the information and the data we need to prove to the community that this is necessary and we can explain why, I think that would go it'd go a long way to helping justify things like that.
So I do want to follow up. Whenever we add something, right, in this kind of situation where this board has really worked to turn the budget around, and we're certainly moving in the right direction, but we're operating on a very thin line here at the moment. So when you add, and these are, I would say, critical supports that are necessary. So even thinking about at the high school level with the counselors that have been added, that's grant-based funding at this point. That's not school dollars or district dollars for us. And so as far as we know, those counselors are booked every half hour of every day. And so at some point, if we don't have additional funding, that has to come from somewhere. So when you say, do you have ideas about where we're fat at this point that we can take away, because that would be what we would have to do without levy support?
I understand that part of it. I do not know where we would have any areas to cut at this point. I haven't had a chance to do a deep dive into the budget. I didn't know if I would be in this situation, so honestly, I haven't. Now, from a budgetary perspective, I would be interested in knowing if we staff those positions with the existing budget, what stuff would we have to drop off? And I think it's important to then prioritize, is there something that could drop off that would be a lower priority for the district, lower priority for the schools, and then these positions could be added to better support the students? And if that's the case, then I think we need to talk about that and have a legitimate conversation about that. I mean, if there's something that is less important, less impactful for the majority, and it can be cut, and that money can be shifted. And again, I understand there's a lot of nuances to the budget that I'm learning. I don't know, I will not say I'm an expert at. But there's a lot of stuff that can't be moved, and I get that.
It's very complex.
I have asked questions about, can you reclassify staff? Is there different ways to sort of move those cost centers so that you're tapping into some of those resources better? So far, a lot of the answers are, we don't think so, or you can, there's limits on how much government funding, state funding, things like that, that can be attributed to salaries and whatnot. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs and, if you can only use 10% of that bucket towards salaries or what, but again, I think those are questions that we should ask, and we should do a bit of a deep dive, honestly, and figure it out. And if there are some areas where we can make cuts, I think it's worth a conversation.
Yeah, I would just add, Director Thompson and I did a very deep dive when we were almost 2 years ago, when we were facing the $7 million budget cut that we came into, and most of our general fund budget goes to staff, and so
Yes.
that is the complication that we face. And so that's where, I feel strongly about those positions we were advocating for, and I can appreciate your comment on the communication. And part of our challenge is so much of our community doesn't have kids in the school, and so
Huge.
how do we reach those people too? And at the same time, in this situation, with a rapidly growing district, it's hard to pull money from elsewhere at this juncture.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brett.
Hi.
Studies show that mental health of students directly impacts academic achievement. You stated in the forum that we need to decouple mental health and education, and that the reality is that teachers are on the front line with that. How would you decouple mental health from education, and why?
It's a very difficult question for me. I don't know the perfect answer to that. Now, when I say decouple, I would love to be able to separate the types of things that my wife tells me she has to deal with versus actually teaching kids. And it's a very difficult situation when you have kids who are on the spectrum or have certain behavioral issues, sensory issues, where they see themselves in a mirror and, they just can't not see that. And they keep, they're distracting themselves, they're not paying attention, they're distracting others. How all those things sort of play into the normal classroom. That's really difficult, I think, for our teachers today to try to be one thing for everybody. And I think that's the point I was trying to make, is I wish we could figure out a better way to decouple the, say, traditional classroom experience with all the behavioral and specialists that we need to sort of support all the different variations going on right now. I mean, it's almost impossible for, a kindergarten teacher to expect them that they can diagnose or know the right methods and techniques for every single behavioral mental health type of situation that they face nowadays. And I think it's almost an impossible task to try to think that somebody can be that, as well as a great educator, as well as, all the other tasks that they have to do, all the administration work that they do, the paperwork, documentation, and everything else. So it kind of goes back to, I guess, your question in terms of support staff. Can we better justify it? Can we better explain to the people in the community why we need the resources and why the resources are absolutely critical at this point? And I think if we could find a better way to split, those avenues, we might make a little bit more headway with the community as a whole.
Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up, Terry?
No.
Okay. Brian?
Hey, thanks for coming in. How do you think we should best evaluate student achievement and academic outcomes for all? And then what are the challenges of relying solely on test scores or other factors, do you think? And what other factors do you think are important to consider when interpreting test scores?
So test scores, the MCAs are one thing that I do have a concern about. And I've heard from people that we did the AP testing during the same week that we did the state test for the MCAs, which I guess people were also allowed to opt out of. So I have a lot of questions in terms of like the standardized test that is used to sort of evaluate the district as a whole. It's the only consistent measure across the entire state that we have at this point. When you compare us to districts that I would think we would want to be like or want to be compared with, your Edinas, your Minnetonkas, your Wayzatas, You know, they're consistently in the 70s almost across the board, whereas we have not been. We've been in, 62, I think, for reading, 55, 56% in math, and 48 or something like that in science. That's not a trend I like. Now, I don't necessarily think that metric alone is the only thing that matters, because we also have a 92% or 94% graduation rate. I know a lot of kids personally from my neighborhood and others that are, in college and had, done really well. And the ACT scores that I think we typically show are a lot higher than what some of those scores represent. So I think it's important to sort of know why that number is what it is. And I don't know if we know that right now, but I mean, a few of the things I mentioned are things I've heard so far. I think it's worth looking into and figuring out if that's a legitimate metric for our district right now. Because I don't feel like it is. I feel like we're better than that. But again, it's the only thing we have to go off of that's consistent across the state. So if we want to be compared against any of the other districts for a litany of reasons, I think we should figure out the why there. What was the other part of your question? Okay.
You didn't have a follow-up? Okay. All right, so thank you for coming in.
Is that it?
Yep, 6 questions, that was it. So thank you for coming in and talking with us. We appreciated that. And the next thing the board will do is we'll deliberate, we'll talk about things, and then we'll actually put it to a vote, and we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we've completed the interview. Opening the floor up to discussion for board members to kind of talk about the questions and the answers and how you feel about things. So I'll go ahead and open the floor up for discussion. Any discussion? Okay. You want to have something to say? I think, well,
I mean, I can certainly- yeah.
go ahead.
I think in terms of some of the questions we had regarding, the board dynamics, thinking about some of the interpersonal things that can impact the board functioning, I appreciated, feedback about, or his comments on listening. I think polite discourse, conversations, those things are obviously very important to how an individual board member functions, as well as how we function interpersonally all together. I think I would say my main concern was, when we think about what was said at the forum, in terms of, I think, as a neuropsychologist, I don't think you can ever decouple mental health from education. And, one of the challenges is, for me, is in his response there, he absolutely identifies the need for supports, which to me is what we critically need to address a lot of the mental health concerns or neurodevelopmental concerns that are impacting the classroom environment and likely impacting how kids are learning, and therefore that has the down trickle effect on educational outcomes. So the thing I'm probably, and this isn't specific to him necessarily, but it's specific to, a large part of our community and per the levy results, and why I'm trying to have some conversations with people in our community. These supports, if we want to think about moving our district forward, are critical. I don't know how we're going to come up with that amount of money to address what we need to absolutely address critically right now. So that is my main concern that we've talked about too, is we need board members to support levies that make sense and we need board members out advocating for these levies. And to me, this isn't political. It's about doing what's right for our kids, which right now we need those supports more than ever. So that's my main concern is we can't decouple those things. Those, if anyone in this room were to step inside of a second, I did last year, step inside my second graders' class and saw all the needs, it's overwhelming. So part of my feedback is to our community, but this idea that we can decouple that is impossible, and I do want someone who's going to advocate for our levies. But I really did appreciate a lot of the other things that he said about, being a board member who listens to both sides and is able to think critically about what is best for our kids. That is absolutely what we need, so.
Thanks. Terry?
Your mic is on.
I pulled Dave here. I was fine with his answers. I just, I have some notes that I'd like to read from a little bit for two reasons. Number one, I'm old and sometimes I wander off from the subject. And secondly, I want to be very clear in what I'm saying. So, over the years, political entities have become involved in nonpartisan school board elections. Even though this has become a reality in District 194, and it is a reality, which saddens me greatly, many communities have decided not to go down this road. In the last 2 weeks, I've received emails from community members urging me to take various actions in regards to selecting the 7th school board member. Many of them I view as purely political. I answer these emails by stating that I am totally against politics being involved in school districts because their agendas usually do not benefit kids, but instead benefit the political entities. School boards should put the needs of students first. Political agendas simply muddy the waters. That's, if you've sent emails to me, you've probably heard that, right? Because that's the way I answered a lot of them. Good examples of this are the issues that Hastings, Osseo, Anoka Hennepin have had resulting in divided boards and divided communities. And that's one of my biggest fears. In regards to selecting our 7th board member, I supported the first proposal that we should just appoint whoever comes in 4th place. To me, that was the best non-political decision that we could make because we would let the voters decide. However, we changed our minds, and I used the word we, and decided to adopt this process. When we did that, it became a political situation for many in our community. Personally, because of my feelings regarding politics in school, I still believe that the best nonpartisan way of selecting our 7th board member was the first proposal, which I intend to honor whether I agree with the candidate's views or not. It is the best way to represent our voters' preferences. That's it.
Thanks, Terry.
Please don't clap, please.
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, I think some of the comments that Mr. Nicholson shared resonated with me. I think Director Carly Anderson, you are right. We did go through a budget exercise, and there wasn't a lot that we could find. But again, it was maybe an exercise where you and I weren't super knowledgeable of the budget, and we didn't have a list of every single budgetary item that we could review or not review. And our district has roughly a $250 million operating budget. Take that back, but 209, but 250 or so a year. I mean, we're going to spend $1 billion over the next 4 years, and of that 250 million, if we can identify an extra 1%, that's $2.5 million there to help offset or reprioritize things where we could where it might make sense. And so I don't think it is too far of an ask to say, hey, can we find a 0.5%? Or 1%, or whatever it might be within the budget. I don't know. So those are things that we can ask the superintendent, or things that we can explore. But wanted to just touch on that comment. Secondarily, I do appreciate Brett bringing up that his wife is an educator. I am not one, and I know we have one on the board here, but I think it's always good to have someone who might be with someone who has boots on the ground and might be able to share the pros and cons and the life of an educator. I think from my perspective, I do come into this more with a business-minded aspect. I tend to look at process. I tend to look at the governance that we do, and sometimes may lack the boots on the ground perspective. And so having someone like that, I think would be value for a board like this. So those are my thoughts.
So I just for clarification, the $250 million budget that we have contains many areas and silos that are not to be, where monies can't be moved from one to the other. So finding 1% across that $250 million isn't really the solution. You have to find out what's in the operating side of things and not within the other components of the budget of what we can utilize into the classroom. So I think we have to be careful on making sure that people understand that it's a very limited amount of dollars that we're looking at to be able to find savings that go into the classroom. So the overall statements, I agree with, the first solution that we brought to the table was to select the fourth largest vote getter, not knowing who that individual was, and just making that commitment, which some of us did, and that did move forward and then was unwound. And so we are in a position now of talking specifically about an individual and whether or not we see them as a good fit for this board in the short term, because long term, that individual, if so chooses, would need to get elected onto the board no later than November, as Chair Baker had said. So, there's decisions now to be made, knowing what we each know and how we each feel about how that fit works into the board. So I know we received several emails talking about our position, what we had stated, but that was under a different scenario, which has changed. So there are different discussions that we have to have at this point. And I appreciate Brett being willing to be part of this process. I appreciate all the candidates being part of the democratic process and stepping up and offering to serve the district. It's an honor to be serving the district and keeping our kids in the forefront. And so with that, I have to agree with Carly in the fact that, the levy that we were trying to get passed is part of what we really needed to help with what Director Lynn's question was around the decoupling of the mental health from the classroom. I'm not sure that we can decouple it, but we can help ease that pain and the support that our teachers and our staff are facing with trying to help our students. And so that is a big concern going forward when we talk about the Edinas and the Minnetonkas and the Wayzatas. They're investing in those supports, and that's why they're able to do, I believe, better in the MCAs. And that's one area that we really do need to focus in on and understand why it is the way it is. And from what we heard through the need for these supports was that the 512 to 1 is part of this issue. So I appreciate all of the areas of response that we heard. And I guess how to address the different needs of all students. I appreciate the listening, but there is more that needs to be done than just simply listening in order to be able to address their needs as a board member. And again, really, truly understanding the mental health support that our students need is really going to be critical for any board member.
David?
Yes, I agree with Carly and Terry that it's very difficult to separate the mental health part with the academic part. Being a former parent, special ed parent liaison, and Kim being one too, and dealing with a lot of special ed families, and I have a special ed son. So And I know it's very difficult for teachers to do that, so I do think that we do need additional staff to help with that, because you can't learn if your head isn't in the right place. And it's hard even to be on the board when your head isn't in the right place. So I totally agree with him on that.
So I'm gonna speak a little bit to that, because I don't think it's right to hold someone accountable for not understanding what it's like to be a teacher in the classroom. I'm an educator. It's been my career. It's been my passion my entire life. I'm the only one in my family that is an educator. So I've had to teach my entire family about that, and they didn't understand. There were times my mom would come and help me set up my classroom. There were times that, she's like, why you have this whole cart full of coats and gloves and hats? Kids don't have them, Mom, and I want to make sure that, the kids in my classroom are warm. That's what teachers do. We provide for our students. We're in the classroom every day, and I don't think that anyone can fully understand what that's like unless you're a teacher yourself. I do know that the district had teachers involved in making videos for the levy and kind of explaining what it was like in their classroom. Again, that's very, very hard to explain to someone who's never sat in front of 30 kids and tried to explain, and try to teach, especially with differentiated instruction and trying to meet all the individual needs that come into a classroom. You may be teaching second grade, but you may have 5 kids that are at a preschool level, 3 kids that are at kindergarten level, 2 kids that are at first grade, and then, some kids that are clear over here on the other end and they're 3 grades ahead. And then being able to do that at the drop of a hat every single day and account for all those differences and make sure that every kid is making progress. It's a hard ask. So I appreciate that he is willing to listen to the educators around him and get perspective from that. That's what my husband does when I'm having him cut out lamination of the many visuals that I'm laminating for students every day. So I understand the needs of the levy. I supported it as an educator who works in the classroom and understands the needs that our teachers face every day within this district and with districts across the country. It's not just Lakeville, it's across our country. And I do feel that there are mental health needs that are just evident in our kids right now because they've experienced some traumatic events. I mean, there was a whole year of instruction that was really not as consistent as we would have liked during COVID, and it takes kids a while to catch up from that and make strides. So I think our educators have done a wonderful job during that. I agree with the academics. I appreciated the answers with that. Knowing that test scores are not the only average of what's going on in the classroom. I appreciate the fact that, we're thinking beyond just those test scores, because that's a glimpse, that's a window of what happened that day. And that child could have been sick, could not have had breakfast, could have, had a million things happen. And the fact that there were kids some of our students that weren't even taking it because AP testing was happening in the same week, I think that was a very important point to bring up. The graduation rate was great. I appreciated him highlighting that. That is something I'm very proud of with Lakeville. That also holds true for our special education population, if people aren't aware of that. It's a very much a point of pride in Lakeville, and one thing that we stand out with among other districts. I also appreciated the comments about communication and how it's important to work together and collaborate, particularly around culture. And building that culture within our district. That's a top-down thing. We're working on healing some of those bridges that happened, and I appreciate that he sees that. So anyway, that's all the notes that I have from it. Anybody else have anything else that they would like to add?
The only other thing I'd like to add is back to something that Director Lind said. I know we did a community survey, and one of the things that was very concerning to our community that ranked very high was to have less politics in the schools. And I do agree with Terry Lind in the fact that in the last couple of campaigns that we're seeing more political endorsements and political ways of getting elected. And if you look at how Lakeville and the school district actually votes, we're pretty purple. And I think it's to me, in a nonpartisan role, I think it's very dangerous to start walking the line of politics all the time. And so I just hope that we can get back to a place of having our candidates and campaigning on what they believe in and what is best for our students, and not having the politics being involved in there. I do hope that who's ever sitting at this table, whether they were elected under a political endorsement or not, or any endorsement for that matter, that is all set aside and the focus is on what is best for our kids and our students, and knowing that our community is really looking for people to be seated here to do just that.
Any further discussion tonight? Okay. So if the board is ready, we'll go ahead and put the candidate to a vote. We'll do a roll call vote for this vote. So Kim Elson will call out each board member and you will say your vote.
Do we need a motion?
You can, yeah, technically, yeah, we probably should. So do we have a motion to put it to a vote?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion by Director David Anderson. Do we have
What
a
is your
second?
motion?
To appoint Brett Nicholson for the 7th board seat.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director David Anderson to vote to appoint Brett Nicholson. Do we have a second? Director Thompson?
I'll second.
So we have a second by Director Thompson. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. So Kim, do you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Carly Anderson,
No.
David Anderson,
Yes.
Terry Lynn,
Yes.
Kim Baker,
Yes.
Brian Thompson,
Yes.
Judy Keller,
No.
All right, motion passes 4-2. The process that we will go through after this vote is there is a 30-day waiting period for the candidate to take office. And then after that time, the person will be able to be appointed to the board. Having completed all the items on our agenda for tonight, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I didn't hear a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn?
All right, so we have a motion by Director Thompson to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor to adjourn the meeting, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries, meeting adjourned. Thanks and have a wonderful evening.